Rules, privileges, and elections called to order. Good morning and welcome to the I don't have my glasses. Committee on Rules, Privileges, and Elections. My name is Karen Koslowitz, and I am chair of this committee. Before we begin, I would like to introduce the members of the Rules Committee who have joined us today. Council member, is Adrian here? She's not in the room, though.
Not in the room.
All right. She's next door. Council member Margaret Chin, Council member Keith Powers. Is Keith here?
Yep.
Okay, and Council member Deborah Rose. I don't see Mark Traeger. And Council member Paul Vallone. I would also like to acknowledge Rules Committee Counsel Lance Palevi. Did I do it good?
You did great.
Okay. And the staff members of the Council's investigative unit, Chuck Davis, Chief Compliance Officer, and investigators Alicia Vassell, Desiree Robinson, and Ramses Booten. We will consider the nomination of Leah Goodridge and Joseph Dewick for the City Planning Commission. Should Ms. Goodridge be appointed by the council, she will be eligible to serve the remainder of a 5-year term that expires on June 30th, 2025. Ms. Goodridge has been nominated by the public advocate. Should Mr. Dewick be appointed by the council, he would be appointed to a 5-year term that expires on June 30th, 2023. Mr. Dewick currently serves on the CPC by appointment of the Borough President of Brooklyn. Today, we are considering his nomination for appointment by the mayor. Chuck Davis, our Chief Compliance Officer, has briefed all members of the committee regarding the contents of each candidate's background and investigation.
Do you want me to do the boilerplate? Do you want me to read the boilerplate?
Yeah, you want to?
Pursuant to the New York City Charter, the City Planning Commission must consist of 13 members with 7 appointments, which includes the appointment of the chair made by the mayor, 1 appointment each made by the public advocate, and each borough president. All members except the chair are subject to the advice and consent of the council. According to the charter, the members should be chosen for their independence, integrity, and civic commitment. City Planning Commission members, other than the chair, are not considered regular city employees, and there is no limitation on the number of terms a CPC member may serve. However, CPC members are prohibited from holding any other city office while serving on the CPC. CPC has several responsibilities. Some of their duties include engaging in planning, focused on the city's orderly growth, improvement, and future development, which should involve considerations concerning appropriate resources for housing, business, industry, recreation, and culture. Overseeing and coordinating environmental reviews mandated by the state's environmental conservation law, and preparing required reports. The CPC also establishes various rules. Some of these rules consist of establishing minimum standards for certifying ULURP applications, establishing criteria associated with the selection of sites for capital projects. The member of the CPC who is designated as the vice chair receives an annual salary of $73,855. The other members receive an annual salary of $64,224. We'd like to welcome Ms. Goodridge and Mr. Duack. Would you both please raise your right hand to be sworn in? Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Do you want to recognize
All
Ms.
right.
Goodridge?
Look at me.
No, I guess, yeah.
Yeah,
Sure.
yeah.
Do you wish to make an opening statement?
Ms. Goodrich, do you wish to make an opening statement?
Yes, please. Good morning. I'm honored to be here and to be the nominee of Public Advocate Jamani Williams to join the City Planning Commission. If my nomination is confirmed, I would be an excellent addition to the CPC. First, I have dedicated my career to fighting for housing rights, racial justice, and community empowerment. I am currently the managing attorney for housing policy at Mobilization for Justice, one of New York's largest and oldest civil legal service organizations. This January will mark 6 years at MFJ, but I have a decade of experience in this field. Through the right to counsel law, many tenants come to my office seeking help in fighting an eviction case. Over the years, I have argued at the New York State Court of Appeals on behalf of a NYCC resident seeking to become remaining family member, launched a housing rights clinic at Brooklyn Law School, and led presentations at universities in the US and abroad on housing rights and gentrification. For my work, I've been awarded the 2019 Public Service Award by the New York County Lawyers Association and the 2018 Rising Star Award by New York Nonprofit Media. As a housing rights attorney, I have developed an expertise in a key angle of the urban planning story, which would greatly contribute to the work of the Commission. Second, I have experience serving on boards and have gained skills that will be transferable to the CPC. In 2018, Mayor Bill de Blasio appointed me as a tenant member on the Rent Guidelines Board. Similar to the CPC, there are meetings which last hours, lengthy reports, housing activists and property owners chanting outside and inside of the meetings, and fellow board members with various perspectives and personalities. While navigating the RGB, I have learned to conduct my own research, get my points across effectively, and ask pertinent questions. I believe that the CPC is a much more intense environment than the RGB, but my background will guide me to be an effective commissioner. Third, I'm deeply passionate about New York City. I was born in Flatbush and raised in a Mitchell-Lama housing in Brownsville, Brooklyn by my mother, who immigrated here from Barbados. I was threatened with not getting oxtails for Christmas if I didn't say that last sentence, so I attended public schools. I have lived in 3 of the 5 boroughs, and I'm an avid researcher of New York history. It would be an honor to be part of conversations and decisions on bettering New York City. I welcome any questions you may have.
Thank you. Mr. Duack?
Thank you, Chair Koslowitz and honorable council and committee members. For context and background, I am a born and raised Brooklynite and have served for over 20 years in New York City government. From 2001 through 2012, by the appointment of then City Council Speaker, the Honorable Peter Vallone Sr., I represented the council on the board of directors of the New York City Economic Development Corporation, EDC, for several terms, having been continuously reappointed by successful councils and speakers. Concurrent with my service on the EDC Board of Directors and its Executive Committee from 2002 through 2012, I also had the privilege of representing the Brooklyn Borough President on the Board of Directors of the New York City Industrial Development Agency, IDA. I served on both the board and its audit committee. In 2012, I was appointed by the Brooklyn Borough President to serve as a member of the City Planning Commission, and in 2017, I was reappointed by current Brooklyn Borough President and Mayor-elect, the Honorable Eric Adams. My tenure has seen a change in administrations from Mayor Bloomberg to Mayor de Blasio and leadership changes at the Department of City Planning from Amanda Burden to Carl Weisbrod to Marissa Lago and now Chair Anita Learmont. Mayor de Blasio, working in tandem with the City Council, has made affordable housing a linchpin and priority of his administration. Our city's pro-growth policy is based on the reality of an increasing population as well as a successful economy. However, the growth has also contributed to exacerbated housing affordability challenges and highlighted capacity limitations on our infrastructure. To that end, and to ensure more economic diversity in our city as it grows and becomes denser, the Department of City Planning introduced mandatory inclusionary housing, MIH, and the City Planning Commission and subsequently this body, the New York City Council, passed MIH, the first mandatory program of its kind in this country. To quote then Deputy Mayor Alicia Glenn referring to MIH, those were foundational policies to help us confront the biggest crisis facing New Yorkers, the cost of housing. With MIH firmly in place, the city has a platform from which to launch its goal of attaining and retaining affordable units by leveraging private development that benefits all. As MIH is dependent on the Uniform Land Use and Review Process, otherwise known as ULURP, which is a multi-year process, we can only expect that as more rezonings take effect, MIH will be another strong tool in the toolbox to create affordable housing needed to maintain a diverse city devoid of any pockets of poverty. There is no doubt that the pandemic has impeded the continuing rollout of MIH, as the administration and its agencies were put into crisis mode dealing with this emergency. For a time, all ULURP actions came to a halt. While I wouldn't say that the pandemic is behind us, and you can see me struggling with my mask, I do believe that through a change in policies and protocols, we are learning to cope with it and are resuming a normal pace of land use actions. Additionally, the many lessons we learned throughout this global health crisis need to be internalized as we plan the future of this great city. Building a recovery for all of us, as Mayor de Blasio has said, means cutting red tape and supporting efforts to make our communities healthier and more accessible. One example of a recovery-oriented policy change is the newly adopted Elevate Transit, Zoning for Accessibility, or ZFA. Through ZFA, developers work with the MTA to set aside space where needed for station elevators. It expands incentives for developers to build elevators and related station upgrades in new high-density buildings. ZFA is a collaboration between the Department of City Planning, Metropolitan Transit Authority, MTA, Mayor's Office for People with Disabilities, and the City Council, building on recommendations from a 2019 City Council report. In general, the land use and review process provides for robust public input from all stakeholders, including local residents, community board members, borough president, and finally, the City Council, which serves as a check and balance. The public has multiple opportunities throughout the process to comment and help shape the final product. I can definitely say that in the past few years, seeing a more collaborative approach by the agency, whether it be interagency or with the council. Ultimately, at one level or another, all the policymakers are accountable to the true stakeholders, which are the residents of this great city. They should know that while we are doing, we can do more and will do more, and I look forward to continuing to serve and being part of the process. Thank you, and I'm now available to answer any questions.
I have a question for Ms. Goodrich. Can you please confirm on the record that you will comply with the guidance you have received from the New York City Conflicts of Interest Board?
Yes, I confirm that I will comply with all guidelines by COI and all guidelines in general.
And this is for both candidates. Can you please describe how you would balance the critical need for more affordable housing in New York City with community concerns?
I'll begin the answer. So I think that, as the city grows denser, if you look at the population of what we're growing, we're going to need to create more housing and more affordable housing. And basically the ULURP process, like I said earlier, provides for robust public input from community members and stakeholders. And what the original applications, as you know, don't come out at the end the way they were originally presented to us. And that's through the input that we get from the community members, the borough presidents, and the community boards. And finally, at the end of the day, the City Council has the ability to modify any application as they see fit and within scope.
Ms. Goodrich?
I am a believer in community economic development, which really puts a community-centered approach in any urban planning and development. I'm also a housing rights attorney and believe that there should be more housing and specifically more affordable housing. I currently live in Brooklyn, and sometimes I look up, the affordable housing units, and I've seen studios for $2,000 for income that is middle or low income. And so affordable housing actually needs to be affordable as well. So the answer is, one, to center the community, as was mentioned, the ULR process, but also being transparent about what affordable actually means, because it means different things to different people, apparently.
Okay, thank you. Do any of my colleagues have any questions? Margaret?
Thank you. Good morning. Mr. Dewick? Dewick? Yes. You're already on the city planning, and I'm sure you're familiar with my district.
Yes, I am.
We come before you quite often. And in your testimony, you focus a lot on MIH.
Correct.
How do you see really improving it, that we can, get more percentage of affordable housing? Because right now it's still very minimal, like 30%, 20%, 25%, and that is a significant tool. And that's one question, and maybe also Ms. Goodrich could address that too, because we want to utilize every tool to fight for more affordable housing. And the other question that I have is that in the rezoning, there's always concern about displacement, gentrification, right? So I'm just, grappling with this issue of how do we prevent that? Or how do we strengthen, residents to make sure that they know how to fight back? And is there any way in the zoning text that would say something like, if you have to demolish a building, let's say, that you have to relocate the tenant and then have them to have the right to return, so that you are doing MIH, or could that be included in MIH, that those units, like if you have to displace 5 tenants, could you include that in MIH, right? So that we sort of give some assurance, to long-term residents. And a lot of them are seniors. They're afraid that, with this rezoning, they're gonna tear down my building to build a bigger building because now they're allowed to. So how do we make sure that we can protect, especially long-term, resident, and most of them, are seniors, and is there a way to kind of use the zoning to sort of provide that protection?
Would you like me to start? So,
Yes.
MIH, as you know, is a program that creates affordable housing without any public investment. The private sector has to fund these affordable units, which is why it can, over time, bear a lot of fruit for the city of New York. We've implemented it, I think, in 2017, 2016, 2017, and obviously projects have to go through a long rezoning process, and it takes time to actually bear fruit from the tree that was planted. So I think over time you're going to see a lot more affordable units coming through MIH. But to get deeper and more affordability, the city, through HPD, is going to have to step in and provide subsidies to complement the private, to leverage more the private investment that's being done. And the same thing with displacement. I think that the best way to combat displacement is through home ownership. Can't throw you out of a home you own, making it more affordable. And I think that with HPD as the lead, because that's what they would do, city planning can take an effective role in helping shape policy that would incent more home ownership, which would be beneficial for all the residents, especially the seniors. So that's my answer to that question. I'll let nominee Goodrich pick up the rest.
One point that was raised was how to help residents fight back against gentrification and displacement. And from just an everyday New Yorker's perspective, myself, one of the challenges is that a lot of New Yorkers are not even aware of any development, redevelopment, or rezoning until it's a very late stage. And so I think that part of helping residents fight back against it is to, the accessibility component, in involving them a lot more. And, you know, not just with the city council member, but like, how do we get out more information that this is happening? Because sometimes when the information is out, it's at the very late stage, and then it's a blurb of like, you're going to get kicked out. And that might not be representative of every single proposal or project. So that's one aspect, and then I think the other, another point was raised of how to protect residents that may be displaced. That's something that I think about every day as a housing rights attorney. I think each project that comes through, there would have to be questions about who exactly would be who exactly would benefit from this project, and we would have to weigh the risks against the benefits. And so, for example, if the proposal would be 2,000 affordable housing units, but then 5,000 people will be displaced, well, clearly that there are more risks there than benefits. And then if those folks are displaced and they're just displaced without any compensation, without anywhere else to live, then clearly the risks are more than the benefits. So I think the developer or whoever is putting forth the proposal would need to include and be asked these questions about what exactly they would do to increase the benefits for the community so that they are weighed more than the risks.
Yeah, I think right now it's really up to the council member, you know, when we negotiate with the administration, that we have to deal with this issue. And we have experience in terms of, you know, giving, you know, tenants the right to return. I mean, that's really depends on negotiation. But definitely in terms of the process, to really strengthen, as you say, a lot of people don't really know what their rights are, and really get the administration to commit to doing more, you know, education and outreach and making sure people know what their rights are and they can organize and fight back. And then I think with Mr. Dewitt, your suggestion, I mean, we should look at MIH and see if also it could relate to affordable homeownership.
Correct.
Because right now you have people building condos, but there's no affordable homeownership. I mean, they could have some, you know, rental unit, or some way some people will build a poor building, you know, for rental, and then their building is condos. So that's something that maybe in the future MIH can look at.
I'd love to see that.
Yeah. So in the city planning, then
That is
you can
something
initiate that
I am
and see how we can help promote
Well, again,
more
I thi-
affordable homeownership.
I concur 100%.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd just like to sort of piggyback on Councilmember Chin's remarks, because we have both had very hard and tough projects to get through. And one of the things that I hear consistently, especially with my last project, was that people didn't feel like they had enough notice, they didn't have enough information, that they weren't informed until too late in the process. Of course, I know that that's not the case. However, I was wondering if you both could comment on whether you think the public review process is significant enough, and the notice that, you know, is given, and if in fact we should increase the number of sort of entry points that the public has to the process before the final determination is made.
I think in terms of, you know, accessibility, one of the main challenges is, you know, a lot of the notices, they may be given digitally. And for a lot of seniors, we're seeing right now, I'm seeing as a housing rights attorney, everything right now is virtual. And a lot of my senior clients are not really able to access housing court. Mm-hmm. They don't have a laptop, and they are not aware of how to use the device on their phone. And so it's exceedingly difficult. Even if there is notice, there is a question of how exactly is that notice being given, and is that excluding or shutting out, or not intentionally, but having the impact of not having as wide of a reach as possible, and especially with the main target audience that is going to be impacted the most, which are seniors who have been living most of the time in these projects, that they've been living in the spaces for 20, 30 years, and then there's a question of, well, you know, where do we go? We're going to be displaced. So I don't have all of the answers, but I know where to start, and the starting point would be looking at how the accessibility and how the communications are put out, and who the target audience is and who it's reaching.
You know, would you
no,
like to comment?
I think anything that can be done to provide more notice, but as you stated earlier, I mean, the community and residents have multiple opportunities. They could come and present at the Borough Board, Community Board, City Planning Commission, City Council, and even prior, many of the agency does scoping meetings or meetings within the community on projects. But any opportunity to get more public input is welcome at any point in the process.
I would like to really task both of you, if you're confirmed, that that you look at the notification process, and that you look at how to allow the residents to have more input, you know, at that public stage, at the public stages. You're absolutely right. There are 3 processes, but we continually hear that people who are directly impacted aren't finding out until the news media starts screaming like, you're going to have this terrible affordable housing project in your neighborhood. So I really would like to see you examine, because we know that a lot of people in the communities that are impacted by these projects don't have access to digital media, are not, you know, technologically savvy. They're not the people who go to the community board meetings on the regular. You know, they certainly don't interact with the borough president's office. So I just want city planning to to look at that process of how we notify people and the period, the review period, and access to the hearings. And that we take in consideration people who have physical disabilities also. Thank you.
Any public comments? I don't see anybody. So with that, I would like to now call the roll.
William Martin, Committee Clerk, roll call vote, Committee on Rules, Privileges, and Elections, on the 2 M's, which are coupled. Chair Kozlowitz.
I vote aye.
Chin.
I vote aye, and congratulations. Look forward to working with you. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you.
Rose.
Congratulations. I vote aye, and I don't look forward to working with you in the future. I'm out.
Right, exactly.
Valone.
Congratulations to both of you. May you have a blessed and happy new year, and I vote aye on both of you.
Thank you.
Adams.
I echo the congratulations to both of you. Thank you in advance for your hard work. I vote aye.
Powers.
I do look forward to working with both of you. And you're already on it, but congratulations and congratulations and good luck. And of course, we're here to be partners with you as well.
Thank you.
I vote aye.
By a vote of 6 in the affirmative, 0 in the negative, and no abstentions, both items have been adopted by the committee.
Thank you very much. I will not be working with you, but congratulations. I'm sure you're going to do a great job.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, committee members.
Okay, with that, this meeting is adjourned.
you so much. It was great meeting you.